Khumalo. In episode 10, we venture into Kampala Ascendant by playing Zero in Khumalo, and we found how efficient it was by itself, acting as an Anarch Proco, giving me lots of credits, lots of draw throughout the entire game. But I'm sure some of you have this nagging thought in mind. If you're playing Zero, why you no play Clan Vengeance? That seems to be the combo that everyone's hyping about, everyone's terrified about. It's the talk of the century as Kampala Ascendant drops upon us. And indeed, when I knew about the combo, but I was like, what's the point of shoehorning the combo in? Especially into Khumalo, when Khumalo himself is able to trash cards from HQ. Seems like adding Clan Vengeance to the mix is kind of overkill. So for those of you unaware, uninitiated about the combo, let's give a bit of background. Clan Vengeance was actually released in the previous cycle. It's quite some time back, and no one really paid any attention to it. I think people were more focused on the other clan art cards, especially Mars for Martians and Counter Surveillance. So those cards distracted people from Clan Vengeance, which was pretty mediocre at that time. The trouble is, with Kampala Ascendant and Zero is what actually pushes this two-card combo over the top, because prior to this, Clan Vengeance did not have a reliable way to gain power counters. You would need to draw into your damage cards, be it your Mad Dash, your Stim Hack, and those are only one use, whereas Zero is a very reliable net damage every turn that guarantees a power counter on Clan Vengeance every turn. Now, having a good combo isn't a bad thing. There are lots of good combos in the game, but what really bugs me about the Clan Vengeance combo with Zero is that this two-card combo is uninteractive. The runner can potentially not make a single run at all, not interact with the corp at all, not really care about what's going on the corpse board. All they need to do is to drop these two cards and hit the Zero every turn, and pretty soon you will have the ability to start wiping your opponent's hand. So that to me feels unthematic, really. Doesn't really make much sense, and I think this is the biggest grief I have with this combo. It's one thing to have a powerful combo, but when it's uninteractive as this, that gives rise to certain uninteractive decks, something needs to be done. So yeah, as with a lot of other people, I'm not really a fan of this combo, but we are going to be exploring it today for a very interesting reason. This was pointed out to me by James Gray. He suggested that I play Clan Vengeance with Consume, and I was like, okay, so Clan Vengeance triggers Consume, that's cool. And then he told me that Consume works with Clan Vengeance just like it works with Apocalypse. You get a virus counter for every trash done with Clan Vengeance. Now suddenly that becomes really good, because the more cards you trash, the more virus counters you get on Consume. If you Clan Vengeance a corp with 5 cards in their hand, which is that typical hand size, that's 5 virus counters on Consume. That's 10 credits from firing a Clan Vengeance. Not only do you get to hand wipe your opponent, you get money out of it, and a pretty sizable chunk of money at that. Now this is what really allures me to this combo. I'm now like, okay, you've got my attention. We are already playing Consume in Khumalo because it's a virus. We are already playing Zero in Khumalo because it's such a good card. Dropping a couple of Clan Vengeances into the deck makes perfect sense. Let's do that. So this is our deck. This is not a pure Clan Vengeance deck in the sense that we won't necessarily be relying on Clan Vengeance to win us the game, unlike certain other self-damage decks that are all into the Clan Vengeance strategy by running damage cards. Clan Vengeance is a cherry on top of the cake for us. This is still at its heart a solid Anarch deck, your standard good stuff Anarch, or rather good stuff Khumalo, as we are running viruses like Yusuf, like Data Sucker, and Consume. So it's a very standard Khumalo deck. We've just tried to make a couple of slots for the Zeros and the Clan Vengeances. So as you can tell from the deck list, some things had to go. Most notably the 2 off-liberated accounts. It really bugs me, but this was the deck list that James Gray handed to me card for card. I won't question him since he's played this deck so much. Let's give this a whirl and see just how good or just how clunky this combo is. money or draw cards in our opening hand, this is a very easy mulligan against CTM. A matchup that y'all are probably sick of by now, but I absolutely love it. Being able to spar against CTM so many times, as always seems to be the case when we play a Khumalo deck, is a good time to refine how we play against CTM and, you know, make less and less mistakes each time we go up against a CTM. Alright, our opponent opens with what seems to be a remote Rashida behind an ice and something else in server too. We can't really contest it given the contour of our opening hand. No sure gambles, no dirty laundry, so you can completely forget about any prospect of running those remotes. Instead, we're just going to play these cards and then they're going to score an AR Enhanced Security with Amani Senai. Possibly the worst possible combination of cards that can come out of my opponent. The only good news here is that they're now down on 0 credits, but so am I, because I just got my daily cast bounced by Amani Senai. That is a bloody annoying card. Did not see that one coming. I thought it was a Rashida, boy I was wrong. Alright, so I still do want to get the daily cast out because it's basically the only economy card in my hand. So the plan here is credit, install cast. I have one more click remaining. I could use 0 here, but I don't want to because I wait for when I can play Clan Vengeance before I can start hitting 0. So I run HQ instead, hit an AR Enhanced Security, and force an Amani Senai Trace, which puts the daily cast back in. Yeah, I misplayed that one, didn't I? I should have ran HQ first click and then click for credit, install cast. By doing it the other way around, I had Amani Senai bounce my daily cast instead of the less valuable 0. Big mistakes there, really costing me a lot of tempo. That's 6 credits and 2 clicks I spent installing daily cast that never came to fruition. Right, it's okay. Third time's a charm. The daily cast is gonna stick this time. They are not going to bounce it with Amani Senai. I'm not gonna ever run again for the rest of the game. That's probably not a good idea, but hey, at least with this daily cast money, I can now take the dream turn I've always been waiting for. Click for a credit, install Clan Vengeance, and start using that 0. I really want to get 0 going here, and once the Clan Vengeance is out of my hand, I can finally start using 0, which not only draws me cards, not only gives me credits, but also charges up the Clan Vengeance. Clan Vengeance is going to be very important in this matchup because we need to get all the hard-hitting users, all the exchange of informations, and all the psychographics out of our opponent's hand. And Clan Vengeance is a very reliable way to do this. There's very little that my opponent can do to counter Clan Vengeance. Right? They would have to tag me before they can even think of trashing the Clan Vengeance. So as long as I can get the Clan Vengeance up in time, I might be in good shape. Now my opponent continues setting up their board here. Thankfully, they're still dirt poor. But the res Amalia, where did that come from? Okay, so the Malia blanks my daily cast. I thought third time's a charm, but no. It seems like this particular daily cast has offended my opponent's family and entire ancestral line because clearly my opponent doesn't want me to get those daily cast credits. After the third install of the daily cast, they decided to blank it with Malia, forcing me to click for credits for the rest of my turn as I want to play the Liberator account from my hand. That's going to take some time. In the meantime, my opponent gets something going in server 1 and I'm going to set up here. With the 0 trigger, I get up to 6 credits, which allows me to drop Liberator accounts and take 8 credits. That's going to be very important because if my opponent slid a Project Build in server 1, the Amani Trace will fire once again and I need to fork out 3 credits in order to beat the Amani Trace. So just making sure that I have enough credits in my credit pool to contest the Amani Trace should that ever fire. Make no mistake, I'm planning to trash the Amani Senai sometime in the future. It's just that time isn't now. I'm not about to get hit by a hard-hitting news. This is not a good time to start running yet, as my opponent now matches my money with a hedge fund and ices up HQ. Right, we have other good news though. The Clan Vengeance has ticked up pretty nicely. We are now at 4 Clan Vengeance tokens. This is where I can start considering popping the Clan Vengeance and wiping my opponent's hand. That will be very important if I decide to play aggressively, because once I start running, I can then pop the Clan Vengeance in order to ensure that my opponent does not get an hard-hitting news off of me as a follow-up, because if I wipe their hand, they cannot possibly have a hard-hitting news in their hand. Right, so I first clicked 0 here, and 0 drew me into StimHack, which gave me a convenient excuse to StimHack server 1, fetching a bill and trashing, I believe that's calibration testing. Yes, so that's 2 to trash the calibration testing, 3 to beat the Amani Senai trace on the project bill, and 4 to outtrace CTM. So that's a total of 9 credits. StimHack doing perfect work here, covering all my credit needs, and now I'm able to clear tag, take money, and be fairly safe from any hard-hitting news triggers. So that StimHack run was huge because it allowed me to steal the bill, trash the Cali testing, and not come out at a credit deficit. My opponent goes in. What am I saying? My opponent double dips in server 1, putting 2 items in the remote and challenging me to go in again. Of course, I'm not going to bite it because I don't have a StimHack in hand. I'm not going to concede all my credits just to challenge that server. Instead, I'm now looking at the Clan Vengeance in my hand and the Clan Vengeance on the table. It's time to continue ticking up. We gotta get more power counters on these cards. So yeah, definitely looking to set out the Clan Vengeance here. But at this point, there's another thing I'm thinking of. I don't really want to pop the Clan Vengeance here yet for 2 reasons. Firstly, my opponent has barely any cards in hand. There's no point popping a 6 power token Clan Vengeance for when my opponent only has 2 or 3 cards in hand. Now they're starting to draw up. This is where it starts getting really tempting to use the Clan Vengeance. I'm not going to fire it here because the second thing I was waiting for was this, my SMC. I was waiting for the Clan Vengeance consume combo. And the reason is simple. If I'm popping the Clan Vengeance, I need to get some money out of it. I need the money to sustain me through the mid to late game until I end off the game by stealing 7 points of agendas. So the consume is going to be very important here because not only will it charge up off my Clan Vengeance, but it will also give me the momentum needed to challenge my opponent's remote servers and start trashing the Malia, start trashing the Amani Senai, and trashing everything in server 1. So the SMC was my golden ticket to begin trashing everything from my opponent's end. Trashing their hand, trashing their board, trashing their ice. So I'm just getting the last of my administrative business settled, which includes recurring a turntable from my bin with Reclaim. Now, I played the Reclaim much earlier on because it was the only recursion card in my deck. I needed the Reclaim to recur turntable because both copies of turntable have hit the bin, and turntable is very important in a matchup where you're up against exchange of information. You need to win the trading war. After my opponent takes the mandatory draw here, I pop the Clan Vengeance. So that's a total of 5 cards straight into the bin from my opponent's hand. But something interesting happens here. Because Clan Vengeance doesn't say force the corp to trash their hand. This means that it activates not only Consume, but it also activates AR Enhanced Security. So my opponent is actually starting their turn with me tagged. This is usually very, very dangerous. My opponent could potentially play a close accounts or an exchange here to punish me. Except they can't, because they have no cards in hand. Clan Vengeance is that good. Instead, my opponent spends their entire turn purging virus counters, knowing that if they didn't, I would have 10 extra credits sitting on my Consume. Now this is awesome. The other thing my opponent could have done was to potentially draw through their R&D to try to find a closed accounts or an exchange of information to punish me for taking the tag, but that wasn't an option either because I had the other Clan Vengeance on the table. If they tried to draw through their deck, I would immediately pop the second Clan Vengeance and force the cards out of their hand once again. So given this one turn breeding window where my opponent, purge virus counters, I'm going to spend my turn clearing their board. I ran the Amani Senai, I fire 0, do a bunch of stuff, and then run the Malia. So by running Malia, I free up my daily cast, which means I'll get more money. I also activate Consume because I trash a co-op card, which means I'm gaining money off Consume as well. So that move made a lot of sense. I'm gaining money 2 ways, both via daily cast and via Consume. Now my opponent's in a bit of a bind here. They see the Clan Vengeance opposite them, meaning that they can't draw through the deck as CTMs normally would. CTM decks love to draw cards because they get combo pieces and their valuable assets and ice. But against Clan Vengeance, you need to trash the Clan Vengeance first before you can begin drawing. So a lot of time wasted. Last turn my opponent purged. This turn, they purged my board of resources. That cost them 4 credits and 2 clicks. And that I'm gonna abuse. This gives me the window to draw with 0, install Yusuf, and start running. Now I'm wondering which server to run. I think I need to start suppressing the remotes first. Usually as Khumalo, you target the HQ, but since they have no cards in HQ, we run server 1 instead. We hit an irrelevant turnpike. At this point, if it isn't obvious by now, we are going tag me. History with CTM games has shown that Khumalo can almost never keep up with CTM in terms of going tagless and clearing tags because Khumalo's econ engine is not that good. Instead, what you usually want to do with Khumalo is install, consume, and then start going ham on all the assets. Trash everything, get consume counters, snowball out of control. And that's exactly what I'm doing. With one run on server 1, I managed to trash 3 cards and get 6 credits worth of virus counters on consume. My opponent can't purge here. If they purge, they are falling further and further behind, giving me more chances to run the central. So they had to let the consume go. Instead, they spent their entire turn drawing up cards, which is very smart. This is exactly what CTM wants to be doing, but this just makes it very easy. All I have to do is run HQ here and pick off the cards in hand. Guarding HQ is an irrelevant IP block. I just have to break the end run, which costs 2 virus counters, 1 to pump strength, 1 to break the last subroutine. The tag subroutine can fire. Again, I'm going tag me at this point, so the tag doesn't matter. We hit HQ and find a resistor. Ha 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 ha. Oh, isn't it sad when Resistor gets hammered by Khumalo before he hits the board? Oh man, poor Resistor, we knew you. Alright, Resistor goes in the bin along with Commercial Bankers Group, so yeah. That was a very good turn for me, denying my opponent's money and more importantly, denying the one piece of ice that causes me a lot of trouble. I'm also going to liberate all the money off my consume, a pretty risky move if they have closed accounts in their hand. Turns out, they didn't. So yeah, sometimes you just have to gamble. CTM doesn't always have the combo cards in hand. They install a bunch of things into server 1, inducing me to check it, but I think I have a much more reliable plan here. I'm just gonna install the second Yusuf and run HQ. This deck rarely ever gets both copies of Yusuf down. Obviously, my console being turntable means that memory is limited, so I don't usually do this, but against CTM, I need to purge all the important tag punishment cards from hand, which I just did. Psychographics just hit the bin, and the double Yusuf allows me to break IP block consistently every run. I gain 2 virus counters on successful run and spend 2 virus counters breaking the IP block. So my runs are basically free. So this is awesome. I fetch both a psychographics and a global food, which I keep in my score area here. So you notice that earlier on when I popped the Clan Vengeance for 5 cards, there's still 5 face down cards in the bin. I could be running that. I know there's probably at least one agenda in there. The reason I'm not touching archives is because I need fodder for turntable. If my opponent plays exchange of information at any point here, swapping my global food for their AR enhanced security, I'll simply run archives and swap the food back into my score area if there's an agenda in archives. But it didn't matter. They spent their entire turn drawing cards, one of which was the project build that I stole off another HQ run. So in terms of deck building with Clan Vengeance, this was about as successful as it gets, but I'd like to draw your attention instead to some of the more interesting strategic maneuvers I made during this game. You know, Clan Vengeance isn't gonna magically win you games. You need to navigate your way through the maze that CTM sets for you. So we'll cover these points one by one. Firstly, as I mentioned at the end of the video, where after firing Clan Vengeance, you don't always run archives, right? You'll be tempted to check archives to see what you have just been, feel good about, you know, putting your opponent's threats in the bin and stealing their agendas. But sometimes you want to leave it there because you want to wait for the corp to score a big agenda before you drop your turntable and then run archives to swap their big agenda over to you. That's a very good strategy, especially against CTM where exchange of information is a big problem. The other thing that you noticed was on the turn where I popped my first Clan Vengeance, I had the second Clan Vengeance sitting on the table, and that was quite important because it took away one of the possible outs for my opponent, which was to draw their R&D and hope that they top deck a big card like Closed Accounts or Exchange of Information to leverage on the tag that I just got from AR Enhanced Security. The second Clan Vengeance, as I mentioned, prevented that. The other thing I did was to wait until I found my consume before popping my first Clan Vengeance. That was actually quite important because in this particular game it ended up inducing my opponent to purge virus counters on the turn I popped Clan Vengeance. They could have done other stuff during their turn. They could have spent their turn trashing my Daily Cast and Clan Vengeance, for example. But that they delayed to the next turn. So effectively, by installing Consume, I bought myself one extra turn, which was one extra turn of firing more zeros, running the remotes, and just, laying in the hurt against my opponent. It's a very big deal because I didn't have all the time in the world. You'll notice that towards the end of the game, all they were doing were clicking to draw, which seems useless at first glance, but in reality, they were drawing to their outs. If they drew into exchange or more psychographics, I could have potentially been in a lot of trouble. So every turn I could delay was very important because it gave me an extra turn to run and attempt to win the game before they found their win condition. Now I think both Apo, my opponent, and myself agreed that the big turn this game was actually not the Clan Vengeance turn. Rather, it was the turn where I fired Stimhack into server 1, where they didn't rest their ice and I stole a project view and trashed their calibration testing. That was the big turn. As I mentioned in the video, I managed to cover all my expenses for that turn with Stimhack, and the Stimhack powered up my Clan Vengeance, which helped. But for my opponent, that was a big loss because they lost. It was a 4 agenda point swing against them. They could have scored the project view with the calibration testing if they went for the fast advanced route, which would have been 2 points in their favor. But instead, the Stimhack run gave me the 2 points. So essentially, it's a 4-point swing in my favor. Had they scored the build through fast advance, the game could have been completely different. They would be on 3 agenda points. Things might have been very dicey for me. So that Stimhack run was huge, and it illustrates how good of a card Stimhack is and why it's usually not a bad idea to blind Stimhack into an ice server when you have Black Orchestra in the bin, because most CTM decks don't pack end the runs other than Enigma, perhaps Toll Booth. Some barriers do end the run, like Resistor and IP Block, but you can trace through them, so that's not an issue. So really all you need is a Black Orchestra in the bin, assuming you're tagless, and Stimhack usually does the work for you. That was the key turn of the game that brought 4 agenda points of swing to my favor and allowed me to close the game that quickly. Other things we know about Clan Vengeance. We noticed that Clan Vengeance gave me the power to run. I can't believe I'm saying this, but throughout the early to mid game, I was playing so passively. I couldn't run at all because I wasn't drawing into my money, and I kept getting my daily cast bounced back and back and back again. That poor daily cast just never got a chance to shine at all. All it did was giving me 2 credits before it got shut down by Malia, and then when I finally managed to trash the Malia, I was going tag me, so my opponent trashed my daily cast. Poor daily cast, rip in peace. But seriously though, I didn't have any money this game, and I couldn't run. But once I was able to clear my opponent's hand with Clan Vengeance, I could be sure they had no hard-hitting news and no exchange of psychographics to punish me. At which point, I could then safely run HQ, run remotes every single turn. So it was a few turns where my opponent was forced to purge, then forced to trash my resources, then forced to click for cards. So those were like 3 to 4 turns where I could just run as much as I wanted to. And I won the game before we got to the point where my opponent amassed a bunch of cards in hand and could potentially threaten psychographics into Project Build. The other thing about Clan Vengeance is that it is something that can be set up without requiring runs. Now, at the start of the video, I mentioned that this was one of the reasons why Clan Vengeance is a poorly designed card in my opinion. Or rather, the combo with Zero, is very uninteractive. The runner doesn't need to run for it to charge up. But in this particular game, I exploited that negative point to my advantage. Because I was able to set up Clan Vengeance without running, I did not have to worry about hard-hitting news tags. I could simply do my own thing, charge up my Clan Vengeance, and then when I had my consume ready, pop the Clan Vengeance and then go tag me from there. That proved to be a very good overarching strategy that allowed me to win the game. Stay tag free in the first few turns, set up my Clan Vengeance, and then go ham once I had enough counters. The final thing to note is that unlike what I initially thought, Clan Vengeance isn't exactly overkill with Khumalo. Even though it seems like you don't need both trash effects to be in effect, you saw this game that Clan Vengeance helped me get past the hurdle of being worried about hard-hitting news. Khumalo, as an ID ability, cannot really deal with hard-hitting news very well because you can't trash hard-hitting users early on. You need 3 virus counters for that, and that's quite a tall ask. So typically, if you play aggressive early on as Khumalo, chances are you're going to get tagged and it's not going to end well for you. Clan Vengeance allows you to skip that phase, and then when you get into the tag me phase where Clan Vengeance becomes blank, that's when Khumalo takes over the driver's seat and propels you to victory. Khumalo this game trashed a key psychographics. Without that trash, my opponent could have threatened a psychographics agenda for the win. It also allowed me to trash Resistor. If my opponent managed to spend a click to install the Resistor, it would have made my life a lot harder. I would not have free access into HQ, or I might not have been able to penetrate my opponent's remotes that easily. Khumalo being able to trash psychographics and resistors for free, along with Mumbat virtual tours in the remotes, trashing it at a 5 credit discount, all these were huge deals. Clan Vengeance and Khumalo worked hand in hand this game to provide all the trashing I needed to fuel consume and deny my opponent any sort of game at all. No assets, no operations. This was Khumalo in command. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this CTM episode. I know it's a lot of CTM games that we have, but they are really enjoyable, and I think they're great learning experiences. I hope you've taken away a lot from the strategic maneuvers that I made this game, because in my opinion these are way more important than whatever deck building decisions I make. So yeah, thanks for watching. Happy net running. Goodbye.